Okay, well, we'll say it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our press conference. And we are delighted today to announce the result of a year-long effort that we have had with the Attorney General's office to crack down on out-of-state companies that were doing business in Connecticut illegally. And we had formed this past year a partnership whereby one attorney from our office and one attorney from the Attorney General's office spent the bulk of their time ferreting out businesses that were operating in our state illegally and recovering $1.7 million in fines and fees owed by those companies. And we're very pleased to say that as a result of this new effort, we've been able to generate more than $1 million than compared to previous years where we've had less than $700,000. But because of this new partnership, we've been able to return to the taxpayers more than $1 million, and we are very pleased to announce this result. We want to let companies in Connecticut know that we welcome them to do business here in Connecticut, but if businesses do operate here, they need to pay attention to state law requirements. They need to register with our office, and they need to pay the fees that are set forth in our state statutes. This is very important for consumers who need to know where to contact companies if they have a consumer issue or a legal issue. We've been able to work with over 600 companies who heretofore were operating illegally in Connecticut and collect fines from almost all of them. The fines that we collected were between $165 and $20,000. And we think it's really important that Connecticut companies who are paying by the rules don't have to operate at a competitive disadvantage, because when you have illegal companies here who are not paying their taxes, who are not paying their registration fees here, it really hurts Connecticut companies, and you're going to hear from a small business owner very shortly who will talk about just that issue. So now I'd like to introduce our Attorney General to talk about his office's participation in this successful partnership.
Thank you. Just to clarify the importance of these rules, any consumer who has been cheated or misled by a company knows that these rules are vital to holding lawbreakers accountable, giving us the legal hook to haul wrongdoers into court or assure strict compliance and scrutiny. These rules give us the tools to make companies play by the rules, treat consumers fairly, and enforce their obligations to other businesses. The registration requirements are basic fundamental fairness. This money has huge ramifications because it sends a message: play by the rules or we will crack down. And these kinds of crackdowns should be unnecessary in the future, because our hope is that companies will play by the rules, and the amounts that are owed by some of these companies, for example, Bisis Insurance Services, $22,725. On Command Video, $15,877. Billiards International, $11,600, show that these rules are not just technical, superficial requirements. They are basic sources of revenue, and they enforce fundamental fairness that gives consumers a place to go when they have complaints. They are also vital to our law enforcement activities, because we need a place and a face and an identity to take to court when these companies break the law. And without this tool, we must sue them in their own state, often at much greater expense, and the same is true of consumers. So my hope is that we send a message The crackdown works. From now on, obey the law, and the fines and penalties, by the way, $1.7 million includes penalties for breaking the law, as well as the fees and interest.
These are basic sources of revenue for the state.
For the state.
For the state, because the state statutes require you to register on an annual basis so consumers know where to make their complaints. And I'll say, Mark, that some companies actually came forward on their own. They realized they were in error, they realized they should have been registered, and they came forward on their own. Other companies came to our attention because their competitors said, hey, wait a minute, here's someone in the same business as we are who are not doing what they need to do.
Mostly it's the internet, right? It's not people coming over the border from New York and Massachusetts to do work here.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's both. It's both. It's not just the internet. What I'm going to do is introduce Paulette Houghton. She is the president of the Connecticut Better Business Bureau, to talk about how important this is for law-abiding businesses.
Before
Sorry, Richard, go
your
ahead.
question is well taken. It is bricks and mortar as well as internet. It's not just internet. And I'm happy to tell you that we enforced these rules without needing to go to court, because the companies recognized their obligation. When we found them and tracked them, they said, basically, we're wrong, you're right, we'll pay.
Paulette Houghton.
Thank you. I'd like to say I came today because on behalf of the members of the Better Business Bureau, and the members of the Better Business Bureau strongly believe in trust. And it's very important that when a consumer is looking to do business with a company, they can trust that company is everything that they say that they are, and they will do a good job. They will provide the services that are needed. And because of the trust, it is very important what is happening here with the Secretary of State and the AG, that they are cracking down on those that leave us with less than trust, because distrust will just destroy everything that the good companies have made happen. So we're very pleased that this is happening, and we want to say a special thank you.
Thank you. And now we'd like to invite Stephen Gidley, who owns a home improvement company in Fairfield County, who will talk about his perspective from a small business.
Hi, everybody. My name is Steve Gidley. I've run a small home improvement doing painting, roofing, and remodeling in Darien, Connecticut for 39 consecutive years, and always registered with the Secretary of the State of Connecticut. And I'm really happy to be here today, particularly to put in a plug for the legitimate businesses in the state of Connecticut that consistently get underbid by out-of-state companies coming over the border without the proper registration and even the proper licensure, which all begs the question, are they properly insured? Workers' compensation insurance, public liability insurance. And if they're not paying these things, then their prices to the public are going to be artificially low, creating an unlevel playing field and an unfair competition. And that's the crux of the matter from the small business person's viewpoint. I'm the brick and mortar guy that Mr. Blumenthal talked about, and we see it consistently. We'll go out, the public wants to get 3 or 4 bids. We'll be X number of dollars, someone will be 10 or 20% less than us. And when we say to that consumer, go back and see if they're licensed, registered, insured, they go back, leave a message, and they don't hear from those companies again. That happens time and time again. So I think that in order for this state to step up its not only surveillance, but its apprehension of these individuals that are operating under the radar is a wonderful thing and a very pro-business thing for the state of Connecticut. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
What are the fees to register?
It depends on what business entity you're talking about, Steve. Generally, it's $60 for a company to register per year. And if you don't do that and you're operating in Connecticut, then under the statutes, you owe $165 per month that you go unregistered.
So is that what all these figures mean? Affordability is not the reason then if people don't pay. There are other reasons. What are they?
Sometimes it's that a company truly doesn't know. You may have a company that was incorporated in the state of New Jersey, They expand their operations to Connecticut, and they just don't know that they need to register to do business in Connecticut.
You know, the most common reason, Steve, is simply oversight and ignorance.
Yeah.
How did we get to those large numbers that you mentioned? 11,000, I think you said 10,000?
Accumulation of years.
Oh, I see, okay. So the $60 times the fee
Yeah,
times
it could be
over-
$2,000 a year if you've missed your registration for a whole year.
And penalties.
And penalties.
But, you know, Steve's point also relates to licensing and registration with the Department of Consumer Protection for home improvement contractors. This registration requirement is separate and apart from the appalling lack of registration by many home improvement contractors with
Yeah,
DCP.
didn't they just do a sting
The
operation?
Litchfield sting, was
Yeah.
that part of this?
Completely separate.
But it's another fee that the businesses have to register.
Yeah, if you're a home improvement contractor, you have to be licensed with the Department of Consumer Protection. And so it's what Steve Gidley was getting at. There are a lot of companies that just don't comply with other state requirements.
Especially if they're working and living along the border.
That's right.
Well, it's not just living along the border, it's actually Connecticut companies as well.
Do these numbers that you're reporting here include back taxes that these companies owe?
No, they just go to the business registration fees and fines and penalties.
Do they owe back tax? State tax?
Some of them may owe back taxes. That information is confidential. We have a number of cases involving some of these companies, number of investigations involving potential back
So
taxes.
if a New Jersey firm is doing business in Connecticut, they have to pay corporate taxes in Connecticut on the business they do here. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, you know, interestingly, some of the companies actually discovered they were unregistered here when their accountants
That you owe taxes.
said, haven't you been paying your Connecticut taxes?
Right.
And they said, well, we're not registered there. Do we need to pay taxes? And the accountant said, well,
Or-
you have a problem.
Or we actually had some companies that were paying their business taxes to the state, but they weren't registered here.
And,
Yeah.
and the DRS doesn't cross-reference you, saying, hey, we got a guy here paying taxes. Now, don't you get a list from the Department of Revenue Services of all of the businesses that are paying business taxes to them, and that you can compare it against? Isn't that an easy way to find out if they're registered
We
or
do
not?
work with DRS because we also find problems where people close down their Connecticut business
Right.
and they cease to operate, but they don't stop their designation in our office, and then we'll find out from DRS
But
that
what
they
I was
owe.
referencing was, when we went to this big new computer system that's across the river here a few years ago, one of the reasons for doing it, we were told, was that there was no interchange of information between state agencies. Is that happening now? Does DRS send you the list of people, companies that are paying business taxes, and you can compare it against the people who are registered here in your
That
office?
my deputy is shaking her head, they do not, but we
They
do
not. Well,
work
why did
on
you spend all that
registration.
money on all of that new computer systems and interface?
That's a
between the
question
agencies?
for the state controller.
Mr. Blumenthal, earlier you gave a couple companies, you named a couple companies. Can you give us like a master list of all the companies that you go after?
We have a master list. I'm not sure it's compiled in a form that we can release momentarily, but we do have a list of companies. We have monthly progress reports that were given to me, and we can put that in some form that is.
I mean, basically all the ones that were involved.
The
in
600,
this
yeah.
investment today.
Sure. Let me just finish on the point, because I want to eliminate any confusion between the registration or licensing with the Department of Consumer Protection and this licensing. The sting that was done in Ridgefield and stings that are done periodically and criminal cases that my office prosecutes are often for failure to register, which is a violation of criminal law. And a large proportion of cases where consumers unfortunately are deprived of the services that they have paid for result from failure to register. And we prosecute those cases criminally, and the investigative and other work that's done is on that failure, as well as the failure to do the work. So that is a program completely separate and apart from this. It involves violations of the criminal law, and there should be stronger punishments, penalties under that law, because Steve is absolutely right. What we find is not only is the work done shoddily, but workers are deprived of adequate and prevailing wages, insurance isn't paid, and there are a variety of other kinds of failings that come along with it.
So the
With this
1.7
stuff-
million, just to clarify, that is registering with the Department of Consumer Protection?
No, it's
and the
registering,
state?
it's registering with our office, because in order to
Secretary of State.
lawfully conduct business in the state of Connecticut, you must register on an annual basis with our office, and then that information is made available to the public, both in our office across the street, but also over the internet, so consumers can do exactly what Steve is suggesting, check to see whether the business is legitimate. That's the baseline test. Are they registered with our office?
So the 1.7 then is the fees and the fines?
There is for failing to register and fines associated with failing to register.
With this effort making the number go up, businesses that you had to contact, is there a feeling for how many more are out there? I mean, does that take a big chunk out of it, or will this work just continue? What's
You
the
know,
feeling?
we do this work on an ongoing basis, and over the past 10 years, generally, we've collected anywhere between $150,000 and $750,000 a year. But because we've had Bill Silk from our office and an attorney from the Attorney General's office focusing on this as their top priority, we've been able to generate $1 million more than we have in past years, because we've really concentrated and focused on that and created this very efficient partnership. So we're going to continue.
Our sense is that the group of outliers has diminished substantially, but we want information from the good guys, because there's no reason that they should be paying and reporting and registering when the bad guys have a pass, and they ought to give us information. We think the number is substantially diminished, but we're hoping to send a message.
And we welcome any business that has a question or thinks they might have neglected to pay registration fees to just come forward and work with us.
But they still pay the same fine, though. I mean, the folks who came forward paid the same fines as the people you went and got.
Well, that's a good question. Actually, some of these amounts are negotiated downward for cooperation. So a business that wants to self-report is likely to encounter goodwill on our part and perhaps pay somewhat less, but we'll find them one way or the other. They're going to continue doing business here. At some point, someone will have a complaint, come to my office, we'll go to track them down, and we'll find they're unregistered. And the Secretary of the State may also apprehend them.
If I'm dealing with a business and I want to know whether or not they're registered,
You'd go to our website and you'd look up the name of the company or the LLC, and if you find them, then you know that they are legitimate businesses in Connecticut, and if not, you need to do some further research, because they may just be a company that hasn't done what they're supposed to be doing.
A lot of contractors have it right on their estimate form, they register
Yeah,
in
their
Connecticut,
license.
they put it right on there.
That's a totally different thing.
Oh, is
The
it?
Uniform Home Improvement Act requires that the instrument of sale, the contract, post the Connecticut
Right.
registration number, which Mr. Blumenthal was saying is part of the DCP, separate from the Secretary of State's requirements.
Could we ask you some questions about other issues that you are both involved in?
Sure.
The General Assembly failed to act on the corrupt pension bill. And last week, Madam Secretary, you told me that one of the reasons that you were upset about Senator DeLuca not resigning was that he was apparently going to be entitled to a $10,000 pension.
Yeah.
That's part of your argument? Are you saying that he ought to go and that they should have passed that bill? What exactly did you mean by bringing that up? Could you step over to the podium?
Sure. They were two separate issues but related. One, I think Senator DeLuca violated the public trust and violated his oath of office, and I believe he could save the taxpayers $250,000 by resigning effective July 5th. I also said that I was disappointed that the legislature didn't pass the pension revocation bill that has been now before them for 4 straight sessions, because people in Senator DeLuca's situation are going to be able to continue to benefit from taxpayer-funded pensions.
But Senator DeLuca only pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor, and I understand there's no version of the bill that would require the rescinding of any pension for pleading guilty to a misdemeanor.
That's correct. Had he been convicted of a felony, then he would not receive his pension under that bill.
So do you say that it ought to apply to misdemeanors as well, or is it just that it has to do with anything to do with your office, which there seems to be some at least peripheral evidence that his case did involve?
You know, the problem that you get into with misdemeanors, there are so many of them. You know, I think that the bill as it started out was well drafted, and I think the General Assembly should pass it.
Do you think that the DeLuca affair proves that it ought to be arrested?
Absolutely, absolutely, because I think taxpayers are very surprised to learn that if you're convicted of a felony, you can continue to collect a pension, like Mr. Elif is doing, like Mr. Alabozek is doing. But go ahead, Richard.
General,
Well, first let me answer your question. I would, you know, I propose the revocation of pensions now for the 4th straight session. I initially proposed it before impeachment, before conviction. My longstanding proposal is limited to felonies, which is how I see it most fairly applied. The failure to pass a revocation bill for corrupt employees and the False Claims Act are the two greatest failings in this General Assembly. If you go to taxpayers, they are absolutely appalled and astonished that a corrupt state official convicted of a felony relating to his official duties can continue to draw the full state pension, and that the state of Connecticut has no proper recourse against a corrupt contractor. So my hope is that we will continue to fight for this reform. I think it is a reform that is much bigger and more important than Senator DeLuca. He would not have lost his pension because he was convicted only of a misdemeanor, but the federal investigation is continuing, and there may be additional action by the federal government.
Do you think that the DeLuca affair should have put more, I mean, when they were voting on this and when they were hemming and hawing about it, it was after the Senator DeLuca thing was public knowledge. It was the last 3 years.
That's right, and I've had
Senator DeLuca's problem should have shown an absolutely bright spotlight. It should have sounded the alarm and shown legislatures that we need a bill that stops pensions to corrupt state employees. The DeLuca affair was proof positive.
And I've had constituents link both issues because they have sent emails to us saying, how can it be that Senator DeLuca remains in office and will be able to continue to collect a pension once he retires from office?
I get the emails too. Thank you for
Thank you.
addressing those issues.
Thank you.